Recording is in progress, Mitch. So we
Okay.
are live,
Okay,
coming
right.
to you live from
Well,
Speyside.
semi live.
Semi-live.
Are you going to say it or am I?
A joke about having a semi. Fucking
Too,
hell.
too obvious, right?
I could tell you, I could see your wee head and your wee eyes rolling. Fucking mouse running at full speed.
The cog spinning. Like, how can I make a joke out of this?
Aye, the hamster behind the wheel.
Anyway, on with the show.
On with the show.
All right, everyone, welcome to our 134th episode. Can you believe it? If you're new here, you've got a wee bit of catching up to do. But today we're going to be diving into the dusty archives of some closed and lost distilleries. These are places that have been seeped in history and legend, sometimes bulldozed to the ground or repurposed into supermarkets, believe it or not. I'm your co host, as always, Mitch Beshard, and joining me on this historical whiskey adventure today is the man with a nose so keen that he can sniff out a distillery that's been closed for 150 years. Mr. Nicholas Palaki, how are you doing, fella?
I'm doing very well indeed. Very well indeed, Mitch. Although you'll probably notice that my voice is probably sounding a little more gravelly than it usually does.
Oh, yeah?
Because well you moved the start time of this recording and I've just come back from Lake Tahoe, so technically for me right now it's 5 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't
I
want to,
didn't think about that,
I
man.
didn't want to tell you that when you said, but I was like, fuck it, yeah. We sometimes like because we're a transatlantic production.
Mm.
You like that? You like that, mate? That?
See, the commitment to the listener. I hope everyone listening right now appreciates Nicholas's commitment right now. Up at
or
five
or
o'clock in the
or
morning, put a
or
wee
the
sausage.
or the brands that are listening, remember that. Start fucking sending me whiskey instead of sending it all to this clown. How are things with you, mate? Have you been?
Yeah, man. I just came back from a wee dip in the spay.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, I just walked
Refreshing.
down with the dog and jumped in. It was nice. It was
Oh, you
just
did?
it's like it's actually really warm here, so it's about 22 today. So I was like, right, I'm gonna go for a dip in the spay because I can't. I've got a cask. I don't know if I've ever talked about this on the show before, but I've got a whiskey cask outside, and I do like a cold plunge in that. But right now, because it's actually too warm, it doesn't stay at a temperature that I need it to be.
You,
So
you gotta get
I
the
use the
ice.
spay.
Gotta get that ice bag in there, mate.
Yeah, that
Interesting though.
it's
To be
a
so,
lot of ice.
I was out, and this might come up later on in the show because we are talking about some really interesting closed distillery stuff. But I was out in a little place called Minden, um, doing a wee bit of cheeky little consultancy stuff for some different whiskey stuff. So that's where I was on Lake Tahoe, just south of Lake Tahoe. There's a beautiful little craft distillery um, called Minden Mill, but it's owned by a company that does some importing for some other whiskey brands, no less, including Loch Lomond Group and Glen Scotia, your most raved about whiskey. So for the
Mm.
first time, Mitch, I got to try some stuff that you've not tasted probably. I was drinking some 30-year-old Loch Lomond and some 22-year-old Glen Scotia, and it was out of this world.
Well, no one likes a show off, Nicholas.
Well, but
So
no, I'm starting to see your passion for it. Like I know why. Like you've obviously been exposed to a lot more of the whiskey than I have.
yeah, it's great
But
juice.
man, yeah, it is great juice. Everything that he touches got a little bit of a Midas touch to it. To be honest, very
Yeah,
impressive.
yeah. We need to get Mr. Ian McAllister on the show here and get him chatting a little bit about Glen Scotia for sure. He's a good lad.
Aye, absolutely. And to be honest with you, the whole team is fantastic. Like there's a chap there called Andy Jack, who actually we should get Andy Jack in the show if we can. His banter is electric. Like it was so funny to have like another Scotsman uh in such a rare
That's a
part.
good name as well.
It is, isn't it? Andy Jack. This
It's a
summer,
double
coming
barrel
to
first
you to
name.
talk about whiskey. Andy Jack, starring in Loch Lomond Group. That would be amazing.
Brilliant.
Yeah, he's a good
Now
lad.
a movie.
He is now he's a movie
Well,
star.
let's get into this today, mate, because we're
Les.
not here to fuck spiders. So let's get into what we're going to talk about today.
Cool.
We're going to do one of our deep dive episodes here, and we're going to get a bit serious and delve into a subject matter that absolutely fascinates me. Closed distilleries. Now we've chatted about these on the kind of show before, and during lockdown, one of my projects was sort of bagging closed distilleries. I found out where they were. I kind of went around them. I've been doing a little bit of that since I've been up in Speyside as well, which has been great. If you haven't listened to the episode we did with Alan Winchester, have a listen to that. We talk about going up into the Cabric and finding some distilleries. Well, not even distilleries, but bothies that were making whiskey back in the 18th, 19th century. A little bit of whiskey archaeology, which is kind of cool. So I spent kind of a lot of time digging into their history, sort of discovering why they were closed, unearthing the tales that surrounded them. And I love it. It's always a great adventure doing this. And I think it's very important when it comes to our whiskey kind of history and heritage in Scotland. I did a few videos of it, and one of them I got into a little bit of trouble for, and I'll explain that in a second. I don't know if I've ever told you this story before, but I'll talk about this when we get on to that particular distillery.
Can't
But
wait.
I think what's fascinating about these places, right, is their impact they've had on the whiskey industry throughout time. And that might be something that's been very major. It might just be that they've just been a little blip and then kind of, disappeared. But I think we always have to look back on these distilleries and see what they did and dig into their stories. And for me, it's fascinating being in the heart of Speyside because I'm surrounded by these old distilleries and what has happened in this amazing whiskey country that I live in.
100%. And let's face it, there has been a bit of a trend of late reopening some of these shuttered distilleries, these kind of mothballed or closed distilleries.
Yeah.
Rosebank, known for its triple distilled Lowland Charm, shuttered its doors in 1993, but thanks to a bit of a resurgence, interest, and investment from Ian MacLeod, set to start producing again. So, aiming to recapture that delicate floral magic. Then there's Port
Yeah.
Ellen, which closed in 1983, whose Ellising malt has become stuff of legend. So Diageo's now reopened that distillery, kind of reinstating that kind of classic peat smoke character that they thought we'd never see again. Obviously, adding massive amounts of value, Mitch, to the huge collection of Port Ellens I'm sure you've amassed over the years having worked for them. And on the same line,
Unfortunately, I've got none left. I drank them all.
oh,
I drank them all.
oh, on the same note, let's not forget Brora, right? Also closed its doors in 1983, and that's now back up and living again, thanks to the team at Diageo as well. So we're going to start, you've got the opportunity to once again taste that waxy, slightly peated profile from that Highland distillery. So incredible to see some of these distilleries get a second lease on life, continuing their legacy and delighting the new generation of whiskey lovers. So here's the history and the spirit of these distilleries that continue to live on.
Absolutely, mate. And it's weird. Like I never thought I would see some of these distilleries open up in my lifetime. I remember when I started to work for Diageo and hearing about all the stories about Brora, about Port Ellen, and I was lucky enough to drink quite a few of them. And then Rosebank as well. Let's not forget that. Another distillery that was closed down by Diageo. Lowland Distillery just opened up again by Ian MacLeod. We chatted about that on the show a few episodes back.
Yep.
So we're living in an unbelievable time right now of these rejuvenated distilleries coming back online and some massive names that we thought would have been lost forever. We're starting to see, and you can visit them. Arguably, some of them you have to have a bit of money to go and visit them, like Port
Mm-hmm.
Ellen and Brora. Cost you a little bit of money to go to those ones, but you can still visit these distilleries and see what's going on, which is unbelievable. But I think before we get into all of this, did you ever sort of visit any like old distillery sites when you were back in Scotland? Like go to any spots where you went and checked out and ones that weren't reopened again?
So it's funny. One of the whiskey distillers I'm actually going to mention and talk about later today in the show, I grew up where the distillery site is no longer there. So last time I'm back, in fact, every time I'm back in Scotland, I obviously go back to Loch Lomond and go back to Dumbarton, hometown. And obviously the Dumbarton site, which was the backbone of Ballantyne's, is no longer there. So
Mm.
yeah, but I mean they've still got a few kind of iconic parts of the building are still left, but outside of that, so but yeah, I need to
So is
get
that where
and
you went like back in the day when you were in your youth, you went there drinking tenants and smoking cigarettes?
no, because it was still a functioning distillery then, so you'd have got close to the site. But to be fair, all the warehousing's still there, like the Dumbuck warehousing in that whole region and area is definitely still all live and kicking. But I never really had a misspent youth, Mitch. I used to go to the snooker. I used to go to the snooker. I never drank in the streets. I don't know about you. I mean, obviously I was brought up, you were dragged up, but don't know what your options are there.
I think we were drinking in the streets last time I was over visiting you in New Jersey. What are you talking about?
Yeah, well, fair enough. Fair enough. But I mean, like talking about all of this, like I think it would, we would be remiss of us if we didn't mention probably the biggest region that felt the closure of distilleries, which is Campbelltown, right? So Campbelltown,
Mm.
once the bustling heart of Scotland's whiskey industry, home to more than 30 distilleries at one point, right? Known as like the whiskey capital of the world. And over 29 of those distilleries closed in a very short space of time. Shall we read through them, Mitch? Shall we
Do
name
you want to
them?
read through?
I
I mean,
can't.
we do have a list of all of them. It's pretty
It,
unbelievable when you see this.
well,
It might be
that
a like 2 hour episode if we start reading them all out, though.
yeah, it was there. But we'll spare you the kind of top to top. But it's, I mean, 29 when you see it listed out, and all the dates and all the years that they were kind of closed down and all the rest of it, dating back to I think 1852 is the oldest one that I can see on here.
Yeah.
1850 actually. Um, so 1837 for Mossfield. So that must be the oldest
And
closure,
it's
effectively.
it's interesting with Campbelltown. I mean, they suffered a little bit because there was a couple of factors, obviously, with prohibition hitting. You look at a lot of these dates, and it's round about that prohibition time, right?
Correct.
1920s.
Yeah.
The vast majority of these distilleries closed down because suddenly they didn't have that market over in the US anymore. The ships weren't sailing in, picking up the whiskey. They just all dried up. Another reason was there was so many of them and they just started to get a little bit greedy with what they were doing. I mean, the worst story that I heard was because it's a fishing town as well. Some of the casks were getting used to store fish, and then distilleries were like literally just struggling to get casks, so they end up chucking their whiskey in the fishy casks. Like that's not going to be a good look. So,
Well,
they were a victim of
you,
their own success in a way,
yeah, if you
but you
drink,
also look at the war, you look at prohibition, it really affected Campbelltown in a massive way. And it's amazing to see it coming back online again, which we've chatted about a few times on the show.
if you, I mean, if you drank that fishy whiskey, it left you a little green around the gills, right?
Fuck's sake.
Joke, leave
Yeah, I'll
leave the
give you that
jokes
one.
to the
I'll
end
give
of
you
the
that one.
episode. There you go, cool.
Right. So what we're going to do on this episode, guys, is we're going to talk about two distilleries each that we've picked from ones that have closed down, no longer exist anymore. So these might be distilleries that you have heard of before, or maybe you've never heard of in your life. I don't know which distilleries you've picked yet, Nicholas. So I'm going to
No.
be interested to hear. But my two distilleries, I'm going to kick off with the Grange at Burnt Island, which is very close to where a lot of my friends and my mum still lives over in Fife. And then I'm going to keep it in the Lowlands because I'm going to move over to Kennet Pans, which is in Clackmannanshire. So that's the two that I've selected. I've got no idea what you're going to chat about, Mr. Polaki. So which ones are you going to do?
So I'm keeping it home. I'm keeping it homegrown, baby. So again, I'm going to talk about Dumbarton and Bowling, two towns that I grew up in Dumbarton, and Bowling is a mile and a half, 2 miles away. So I'm going to talk about Little Mill, which is the silent, sleeping, lost distillery, destroyed building. We shall never see it again unless we build it from the ground up, which I don't think will ever happen because the stills have been relocated. And then Dumbarton Distillery, which again, I think I touched on it a little bit earlier, but this was, Hiram Walker and Co. and the guys that kind of it was the backbone of Ballantine's, one of the biggest blended whiskies. So spreading a bit of love around, a little mixed bag from the single malt world over to the blended. grain distillery kind of production stuff. So, want me to kick things off, Mitch? Talk a little about
Yeah,
Little
man.
Mill.
You go first, and then you do one, then I'll do one, and then we can chat about them in between. And
Sounds good.
we really haven't scripted out this episode that much at all. So it's going to be interesting to see how this goes.
Well, exactly. So, like, I guess going back in the day, like in the 15th century, like most people were drinking beer, and the brewery on the grounds of Auchan Torley supply, amongst others, the monks of nearby Paisley Abbey. So Archibald and George Buchanan had their eye on kind of making something a little bit more complex and significant, a little bit more valuable. And they basically established Scotland's first and oldest licensed whiskey distillery in 1772, Little Mill. So that same year, accommodation was built next to the distillery to house the excise officers, who obviously you need to have on site to ensure all the distillation that was duly recorded and relevant taxes were calculated. But even that's even before like the excise tax had been passed right across all of these distilleries. So this is, suggests that basically it also on that note, like I think it suggests that probably there was distillation happening before 1772, but this was like the first actual licensed whiskey distillery in the region. Um, Indeed, in a less than official capacity, the brewery, which was attached to Dunglass Castle nearby, may have been distilling liquor as early as the 14th century. After 1 year, on the 2nd of November 1773, local justice of the peace records for the Barton show that Robert Muir of Little Mill, an employee, was granted the first ever license by the government of King George III to retail ale, beer, and other excisable liquors. The distillery changed hands many times over the years, but notably in 1823, Jane McGregor, which I think you spoke about her before at one point, she was the first ever woman licensee in Scotland and, in fact, in the world. So Little Mill has got like a bit of it was a fairly pioneering and trend setting and distillery over its 220 years of operation, uh, where, there was the date stone on the gable end of one of the warehouses, which was carved 1772, remained firmly and proudly in place until 1994 when the distillery was closed. The stills of Little Mill finally fell silent. The actual stills, these like amazing straight neck stills, were actually relocated, dismantled, and moved to Loch Lomond Distillery. So that's why Loch Lomond has that kind of Frankenstein still room, right? Where you've got, swan neck stills, classic swan neck stills, and then those totally unique straight neck stills that produce that really kind of floral, light, aromatic flavor profile, um, is all actually ex Little Mill stills.
I think it's a really fascinating story in that there is some liquid of Little Mill still kicking around, right? Loch Lomond still have bottles of it for
They
sale.
do, and it's super old. Like the majority of the inventory that they currently carry is super rare. Like it's like once in a lifetime stock. And I can tell you right now that the stuff that's in the States, and it's all like 45, 48, 50-year olds, like super rare stuff. I mean, I think there's less than 100 bottles of it here, you in the USA, which is mental when you think about it. They've probably got a few casks of it still in Scotland as well with Loch Lomond Group, but everything that I see
Have you
about
ever
that
tasted
brand,
it?
not yet.
Yeah, I remember Dad's was doing quite a bit of work with Little Mill, and he had a couple of samples of it, and I'm sure at one point he brought some round and we had a little taste of it. But I think we were quite a few bevies in at that point, so I can't really remember it. But yeah, fascinating story, right? I mean, I
Super
think
cool.
it's interesting right now because there's all these arguments going around with regards to what is the oldest distillery in Scotland, and some people say Glenturret. Then there's an argument for Strathisla as well. Little Mill's obviously there, but Little Mill doesn't exist anymore, so that's kind of taken out the equation. It's like
Correct.
what's the oldest one that's still running? That's the
Yeah.
kind of argument that's going on right now. So yeah, I think yeah, Little Mill's a really cool story, and I love the fact that there is still some bottles of it kicking around. The distillery I'm going to talk about does not have any bottles remaining, and this is I stumbled upon this distillery by accident. I've got to admit, and it was because I was just getting into starting my whiskey journey, not starting my whiskey journey, but starting my whiskey career with Diageo. So this is going back to early 2000s here. And I've got a good friend of mine, Sandy, and Sandy actually lives down the road from me now in Speyside. But at the time, he was living just down the road from me over in Fife. I was living in Dalgety Bay. He was living in Burnt Island. Sandy is very handy. What he did was he built this man cave, right? And it was like great sort of bar. Went in there and I see this poster behind the bar and it says Old Burnt Island Whiskey. And I was like, Burnt Island had a distillery? And Sandy's like, yeah, it's literally just up the road from where he had his house. So we grabbed our drinks and he walked me 5 minutes up the road, showed me the old warehouse, showed me the old distilleries, manager's house. And that was how I got introduced to the Grange, which was the distillery at Burnt Island. And part of it still remains today. It kind of really fascinated me, and that's how I started to dig into like these old distilleries and see which ones were around. And actually, during lockdown, one of my projects was create video content on things to do around about whiskey. And I walked from Aberlour, where I was staying, and Burnt Island is the next town. So I walked through there, did a whole video, poked my camera into the old warehouses, interviewed some people that were actually kind of living there at the time, and kind of did a whole piece on the Grange. So it's a really fascinating distillery. Again, it started up as a brewery, and we have to go back to 1767 here. And when you look at the history, we have the Young family that pretty much either ran the place themselves or kind of leased it out. But initially, the whole idea was that the town council paid them £55 a year just to keep the locals well lubricated with beer and ale, which was kind of cool, right? 6 years later, they thought, well, why not whiskey? You know, for us in Scotland, beer is never strong enough, so we have to make it into whiskey. And then the brewery became a distillery. So 130 years, the Grange was open. And like I say, by the Young family who either ran it themselves or leased it out. And they were a bit of a big deal in the area. They even gifted Burnt Island its own music hall back in 1869. I suppose that kind of made sense, right? I mean, if you're making whiskey, then you want to build a place where you want to sell it as well. So obviously, quite smart with regards to what these guys did as a family. But the distillery saw a major rebuild in 1806. It got its official license in 1813. And then if we fast forward to the 19th century, the Youngs got into a fierce battle over the water rights with one of the landowners further up the hill, a gentleman called David Logan, and he ran the Grange Quarry. This battle went on for 40 years. So pretty incredible to think about a distillery actually fighting about their water source for 40 years, right? It ended up with David Logan having to cough up for a massive reservoir and piping to protect the distillery's water source. So in the video, I actually film the distillery and then I walk up the hill and find the water source and this well that David Logan had to buy. So by the 1880s, the Grange had become a state-of-the-art operation, and it was making a lot of whiskey. They even employed two traveling salesmen to promote their old Burnt Island malt whiskey, which is going back to the poster that I saw in Sandy's man cave. So really cool to see that Burnt Island had its own distillery. And again, when I did some digging into this, Alfred Barnard, the famed whiskey journalist who toured 129 distilleries across Scotland in 1885, he did quite well, he visited the Grange and he noted quite a lot about it, including the fact that it had 19 warehouses capable of storing 650,000 gallons of whiskey. He also recorded that the distillery was producing between 200 and 260,000 litres a year. I suppose when you look at that in today's terms, it's quite a modest amount, but you know, a considerable amount in the 1800s, obviously. But despite its success, the distillery unfortunately couldn't escape the challenging times of the 20th century. In 1940, it joined forces with other distilleries to form Scotch Malt Distillers Limited, and it shut down in World War One. It briefly came back post-war, but ultimately closed down in 1927. The warehouses were still in use until 1987, but now they're completely empty. And you'll see that if you look at the video. I'll post the link for the video in the comments here if you want to check it out. But I poke my camera into the warehouse and there's literally nothing there. That's the only thing that still stands with the Grange is just this warehouse, and the distillery manager's house is now being converted into a beautiful 6 bedroom house. And I actually chatted to the guy who owned the house when I did the video, and he gave me some information about it as well. So really kind of cool to see that. For me, I think that's a great thing about Scotland, especially where I am in Speyside, is you turn a corner and you're like, okay, that used to be a distillery there. And there's some signs if you know what to look for
Mhm.
with regards to if a distillery was around, the obviously the pagoda, which has been repurposed in a lot of buildings up here. You see that everywhere around Speyside. So yeah, that's the Grange, which is my lost, closed forever distillery.
That's super cool. And actually, also the inspiration for the ZZ Top song, right? La Grange. No, no, that was a reach. It was great song,
Was it really?
great history there, Mitch. Like that's like yeah, super cool story, man. So I'll crack on with the next one. Dumbarton, obviously born and raised there, lived. I grew up with the sounds, sights, and smells, specifically smells of this distillery on my doorstep. It was, less than a mile away from where I was when I was spent 18 years of my life, in Alexander Street. But Dumbarton Distillery was the key home for Ballantine's. Okay. So in 1936, Canadian distiller Hiram Walker, Gooderham and Warts purchased the notable blender George Ballantyne and Sons, giving it huge amounts of stock of mature whiskey and an established brand with Ballantine's. But there actually wasn't a distillery. Obviously, as you know, Mitch, lots of the blenders at the time didn't have distilleries. Johnny Walker being another great example, but it had acquired Glenburgie in 1930 and bought Milton Duff in 1936. But it lacked a reliable source of grain whiskey for the blend. So the following year, it established Hiram Walker, Scotland, to oversee the new Scottish operations, as well as build a new grain and malt distillery complex at the old Macmillan shipyards on the banks of the River Leven, which was to act as the group's headquarters. So this was like they're all singing, all dancing foray into Scotch whiskies, Scotland, and whiskey and distillery building. So at the time Dumbarton began distilling in 1938, it was the largest continuous distillery in Scotland producing grain whiskey. So not only I mean, like that's insane, but it's also the first challenge to the supremacy of the coffee still by installing American style stainless steel column built stills by Vulcan Copper and Supply Company of Cincinnati. So the continuous distilling unit had the ability to produce both potable grain spirit as well as neutral grain spirit, but could only process maize. So while Dumbarton was producing grain whiskey for the Ballantine's blend, Inverleven, which opened at the same year, began producing malt whiskey for the blend. In 1956, a third Loman still was added with an attached rectification column designed to produce different styles of spirit. Now, while they still used Inverleven's wash still, spirit receiver and low wines and faints charger, it was technically classified as a separate distillery called Loman, and it was decommissioned in 1985, though it still was salvaged by Isla's Bruichladdich to produce the Botanist gin. It's fucking cool, right? Like all this history of all these stills and how it was all broken apart. So this is like you know, how these amazing distilleries, even when they're being decommissioned, can still kind of breathe life into new projects. So in 1988, Hiram Walker was sold to Allied Lines, and so Dumbarton fell for the first time under British ownership. 3 years later, Allied mothballed the Inverleven distillery, and in 2002, Dumbarton followed suit. The buildings have since been demolished to take away for like new housing developments, including the site's long-standing iconic red tower. So that's what I remember as a kid. Like it was, you could see it from most parts of Dumbarton walking around town. Uh, there's no record of Dumbarton's history would be complete without mentioning the Scotch Watch. And I think I've spoken about this before on the show, talking about kind of, I think it was like a myths and legends and kind of quirky stories episode. But they used to have 100 strong gaggle of Chinese white geese introduced by Hiram Walker. I think it was one of the distillery managers actually came up with the idea to where they were having problems with theft. So they brought in these geese which are massively loyal. So they trained the geese to basically be the watchdogs because security guards are expensive and Alsatians couldn't do the job as to the same degree. So they had these gaggle of 100 geese that kind of became iconic and stopped intruders getting into the whiskey stocks. And these birds were such a tourist attraction that it was used to advertise the Ballantine's blend back in the day. So when the Barton finally closed in 2002, the geese stayed put for another 10 years around those warehouses in Dumbuck, which are still there to this day. So the Dumbuck warehouses, which I think is still used by Loch Lomond Group as well, and certainly by Pernod Ricard. Lots of their warehouses are still kind of in the buck in this region. But the birds were finally left to retire, and the existing flock, I think, were sent to Glasgow Green. So it's pretty cool, right?
I love the fact they were sent to Glasgow Green. You can just imagine, like, oh yeah, just go into this park, and then they just start attacking everyone, you know.
Well, that's exactly that. Like, fucking hell, mate. Off my green. I'm a Glasgow. I'm a
I love,
Glasgow goose now. Who you looking
I
at?
love
Who
that.
you looking at?
I love that goose story. That's incredible that they had guard geese.
Indeed. Actually, I actually didn't know that the stills were salvaged by Bruichladdich to produce Botanist. I didn't know that's where
Mm.
Botanist gins had come from. I think that's pretty cool.
I think they call that still Ugly Betty, if I remember correctly from my visit over there.
I well, it's from Dumbarton, so that doesn't shock me. That was probably my first bird. Who knows?
But anyway, moving away from the West Coast, I'm going to keep it over on the East Coast and talk about Kennet Pans, which I've mentioned on the show before because I genuinely love this distillery and I love it in the fact that you can go and visit it and still see that it was an incredible working distillery producing a vast amount of whiskey for this period of time. So if we rewind all the way back to the 1700s, the Kennet Pans, well, Kennet Pans is a salt panning hotspot, right? Thanks to some enterprising monks who thought, why not make some salt while we're here? You know, obviously at the same point in time, they're dabbling a little bit in making some kind of spirit because that's what monks were doing at the time, arguably Yushkava, uh, or aquavitae, as they would call it.
Yep.
So the exact dates to when these monks were there is a bit of a mystery, but we know they took their leave during the Reformation, right? And at this point, we have entering onto the scene the Steens, who are a bunch of local farmers, but they have really this kind of thirst for innovation. And story goes that they learned their art of distilling from the monks before they left. By 1730, they built Kennet Pans and transformed it into one of Scotland's largest distilleries. So, for this story to kind of take shape, I need to paint a picture of what's going on down in England, because you have to remember at the same time in London, the gin market has exploded. And we're talking from 3.5 million gallons in 1727 to 5.5 million gallons in 1738. This is where we get this term, the mother's ruin, from. Uh, a lot of people listening may have seen William Hogarth's picture, Gin Lane. That was from 1751. And you know, I used to talk about gin a lot back in my Diageo days. And I used to carry like uh, this picture around with me to show people how bad it was down in London. I mean, everyone was drinking gin because it was safer to drink than water. It was estimated, I think it was about 2 liters of gin everyone was drinking per day. And this picture, Gin Lane, depicts just everyone looking like shit, fighting with each other. There's the most horrendous part of this painting is a mother right in the front of the painting. I don't know if you've seen it, Nicholas, but it's like the baby's falling out of her arms because she's just completely oblivious, like on this gin, obviously.
Yep.
Uh, Everyone else looks like zombies. You know, check it out. If you haven't seen Gin Lane by William Hogarth, like have a look at this. So the Steens saw this as an opportunity, and by 1777, they started exporting their, let's call it spirit, down to London because it was new make spirit that they were, you know, by all means it was whiskey at the time, but it was essentially new make spirit. They would send it down to London for rectification into gin, which was a really bold move at the time, but it paid off spectacularly. So for them, their exports soared from 2,000 gallons to 184,000 gallons by 1782. They were expanding so much they built another distillery called Kilbaggy, and that distillery just up the road was capable of producing 5,000 gallons per day. But what happened was the London distillers started to realize that Scotland was producing so much of their neutral grain spirit. They didn't like that, and they fought back by doing things like bribing officials and lobbying for new restrictions on these distillers in Scotland. And that came to play in 1786 when the Scottish Distillery Act was imposed to put extra duties on all these spirit makers, let's call it, producing spirit in Scotland and sending it down to England. And that caused sales to plummet. It was so bad that James Steen at the time, he actually went and bribed an excise officer so he could start exporting more down to London and get away without paying this tax. The story goes that he bribed the excise officer £500, which doesn't sound a lot right now, but supposedly back in the day, that was about 100 grand. And the way he did it was he put it in a box, disguised it as a box of gloves. Didn't really work because the excise officer reported him, big legal drama ensued, and it ended up that James Steen actually turned around and sued the excise for £800,000, which would have equated to about 17 million in today's terms for business losses, which is pretty fucking crazy. Needless to say, that wasn't a very successful attempt at suing them. That didn't work very well, but it obviously caused massive problems for them because that was their main market. It wasn't whiskey; it was this gin market. But one thing that stands out for me is how big an operation they had at Kennetpans and Kilbaggy, just up the road. The combined production led to duties that surpassed Scotland's total land tax at the time, which is pretty incredible. Scotland's first railway line, and that connected the two distilleries and one of its earliest canals. So John Steen even ordered Scotland's first ever steam engine to go between the two distilleries. So the Steens were way ahead of their time. Arguably, you could say they invented the industrial whiskey making in Scotland at the time. So to solidify this relationship within the whiskey world, John Haig married John Steen's daughter, Margaret. Their 5 sons were groomed into top-notch distillers, and they took the whiskey world by storm with the Haig brand that we know today. It was so successful that from 1930 to 1970, it became Scotland's top-selling whiskey. And Haig, as we know, Haig Club today, David Beckham I don't know if he's still involved in that. I think we talked about that at some point in the show. But yeah, Haig Club is still a Diageo brand that's out there. And Haig also created the Cameron Bridge Distillery, again, which is owned by Diageo, so the tie-in there. By 1780, John Steen had distilleries in Dublin. And this is where it gets really interesting as well, because here we have John Jameson from Alloa coming into play. He moves to Dublin and he took over Steen's operation. He renamed it John Jameson's and Son, and the rest is history that everyone listening will know about with regards to Ireland's top-selling whiskey, which I think is hilarious that it was actually a Scotsman that created it all. Little fun trivia fact for everyone there. But going back to Kennetpans, by 1788, the Lowland license comes into play, really crushing Scottish exports, leaving Kennetpans and Kilbaggy in financial ruin. Together with the Haigs, these 3 distilleries controlled 50% of Scotland's whiskey production. After their collapse, it had widespread economic repercussions. Even the Royal Bank of Scotland felt the pinch from this. So it was a massive, massive issue, or a bit of a big deal at the time in Scotland. So Kennetpans Distillery closed in 1825. That was the same year that John Steen passed away. And that was the end of the operation. So next time you're driving over the Clackmannanshire Bridge north, have a wee peek to the left and you can maybe spot the ruins of Kennet Pans. It's a bit of a pain to get down to, but if you do want to go and have a look at the site, don't do what I did and kind of jump over the fence and got in trouble by the owners. That's what I kind of did with the video, but it's amazing to see it. When I went there, you can still see the entire structure of the still house. The warehouse doesn't have a roof on it anymore, but the walls are still completely intact. And it's that old that it actually has trees growing through it. So when I was there, I was actually flying my drone through the trees. It was a beautiful sunny day. Amazing to see this history and really is a timepiece of Scotch whiskey history that exists today. And unlike a lot of the distilleries that we've been talking about already, you can go and visit it. Just don't jump over the fence like I did and get in trouble.
Yeah, Mitch's long history of breaking, entering, and trespassing there. So that was cool. Great history. And like I think the running theme here is like all these distilleries have all spawned new things. Like these creators, these producers, it's not been for nothing, right? All these distilleries have even some of the stills being reused to create different spirits or existing spirits that we get to taste these days. I think that's pretty impressive.
And I think it's an interesting time, right? What's going on as we record this at the moment? We've got 151 distilleries, I think it is, in Scotland at the moment.
Mhm.
We've got this consistent new distilleries coming online, old distilleries getting rejuvenated. And there's a lot of talk about how Scotch whiskey is going to be going down. Sales are struggling in the US. They're good in other places around the world, but are we seeing this another whiskey lock come into play? Yeah, I like to keep positive about all that, and I think there's a lot of hype around what's going on. I was recently reading and we'll probably talk about this in our next catch up, but an article that was written about how Glenmorangie are taking their 10-year old up to a 12-year-old,
Yeah, I saw that.
and that's the kind of state of play of Scotch whiskey right now because the brands are really starting to up their game, which I don't know. This is probably a conversation for another time, and I think we maybe need to do a whole episode on the state of Scotch whiskey now. Are we heading for another whiskey lock? Are we heading for another depression? I still don't believe we are. I still think everything's very buoyant, and there's a lot of articles coming out right now that are doing a bit of scaremongering, which I'm personally not a big fan of. The US needs to pull its fucking finger out. Let's face it. Anyone listening from the US, start drinking more Scotch whiskey. But I also think it's partly to do with us. It's our fault. I think a lot of distilleries or a lot of brands have been too greedy, have taken way too much price on their brands and pushed that up. And now they're starting to feel the effects of it. So
Mhm.
we have to be, I think we're at a very, very crucial part within our whiskey industry right now because it could go either way. I don't know how you feel about that Nicholas. I don't know if we're going to be, again, someone the the reincarnation of Mitch and Nicholas that's sitting here 50 years from now talking about this is going to have a different conversation, or if they're going to be talking about distilleries that we're talking about just opening up, closing down again because we've seen this recession. I hope not, and I think everything's still looking very positive for Scotch whiskey and whiskey in general.
I hope so. I think like it's difficult to look at it year to year to year to year. That's not how we do anything in Scotch whiskey, right? I would arguably say that, most whiskey companies have a 50-year plan, um, which is fascinating to look at. But you've got to be able to operate within that 50-year plan and be nimble. So, for example, if Glenmorangie had a lot of 10-year-old stock that they couldn't sell, now it's 12 years old. Got to change your age statement because it's a 12-year-old. So like that's the way I kind of read that, rather than them trying to up the game well, they've not managed to sell enough of the 10-year-old. So now it's aged out, they might as well sell it as a 12-year-old, take the credit of it being a 12-year-old age statement and the price associated with that type of quality of liquid. The whiskies are still exceptional. Like the whiskies are fantastic. But is that a sign of not being able to sell some of that younger stock? And will that help the industry move maybe towards more age statement inventory rather than a lot of the non-age statement whiskies that we've seen over the last 15 years really kind of have to come into play because age stocks weren't readily available, specifically in that 10 to 12-year old age category. There was an issue. So maybe that's something that allows us to come up for breathing room. So it's not all a negative. I think it's just a reality. So, if
Yeah.
the reality of it is that, okay, cool, there's not an appetite for that style of whiskey. Now we're starting to see maybe some of those age inventories come in the same way that when Scotch whiskey was really exploding 15 years ago, a lot of brands weren't prepared for it. So they didn't have, excessive amounts of 10-year-old or 8-year-old or things that would become 12 readily, the entry level price point and the entry level whiskies at that time probably would have been 10 or 12-year-old whiskey. And now, we're starting to maybe see some of those come back into play, which would be nice. Like, I think it's just different. It's just different whiskies, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting to see because I'm seeing now for the first time in a long time, uh, single malts being discounted a little bit,
Oh, there
and
you
I'm
go.
hearing a lot of that is happening in the US as well. I don't know if you were seeing that when you're out and about.
I mean, to some degree, but I think it depends on the brand, and I think you're right. I think it depends on the way that they've come to market and their price strategy. They might have to discount now, or the brands that you're seeing that may be seeing discounts on them might be brands that have taken three price increases every year for 3 years, and like you said, I don't necessarily know if it's greed or if it's costs of doing everything have gone up. Like costs of grain are extortionate. Costs of production are much, much higher than they've ever been. Costs of doing business globally, shipping costs, specifically because of COVID. I can tell you right now, my container cost from Japan went from being about $3,000 to $22,000 per container, like overnight, and we just had to eat it. We ate it as a brand. We've actually never Shibu's never taken price in 3.5 years, which is wildly unheard of, especially in Japanese whiskey, specifically looking at our competitors who have taken, I think last time I looked, some of the big boys had taken five price increases in the same year. That's nuts. Like that's greedy. Or it's a lack of understanding about if you need to alter your price 5 times in the same year, like you don't know what your value should be. Do you know what I
Mhm.
mean? Or you're just
I think
reading
this is a good subject for another episode for sure. Like we could
100%.
get right into the nitty gritty of this.
Yeah, we should get some pricing
Let's
people
earmark
on.
that one for the next one.
Yeah, how do you come up with the
Oh yeah,
pricing? How are you looking at
an
the
interesting
value?
one.
Yeah. I'm sure there'll be loads of brands
I'm sure
desperate
they'd
to
love
send
to
their
chat.
pricing strategy
Yeah.
people on the show. They'd be like, please don't do that.
Right, dude. Well, I need to shoot off because I'm going to Inverness to do a wee whiskey tasting
Very
for some
nice.
clients over there.
Well,
But
and I
it's been
need
a great chat. Good
it
chat.
has, yeah. I'm
Good
gonna go
chat
back.
to
I'm gonna
talk
go back
about.
to bed.
All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for listening. Hopefully, you enjoyed a little catch up about closed distilleries, little walk down memory lane, uh,
I do have
seeing
what
what happened in the past.
I do have one wee joke for you, Mitch, because I was thinking about you the other day. I was listening to an album, old school album came on the radio. It was Pearl Jam. I know you're a Pearl Jam fan, and I was rocking out, and I
Yeah.
just thought, do you know what? Doesn't get any better than this.
And on that note, thanks for listening, guys. We'll see
Mm,
you next time.